Welcome all. It's my privilege to introduce our speaker. Dr. Dwight Peterson spent some of his growing up years in Oklahoma, attending high school there as well as Bethany Nazarene College. He holds a PhD from the Duke Divinity School. He's often involved in his local church, currently an elder has been elders in Presbyterian churches in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, currently attending a Lutheran church where, among other things, he greatly enjoys the celebration of the Eucharist on a weekly basis. Best decision he ever made, he states, marrying Margaret in July of 1997. There's a bit more. Best fortune he and Margaret ever had was adopting Mark in 2001 when he was 10 days old. The next may remain unmentioned, but let me say it since it's here. He's a Red Sox fan. And a Phillies fan. And this I like, he's a Bruce Cockburn fan. Love it. Dwight, I do like Bruce Cockburn. For those of you who have just arrived in our community, Dwight was ill and in the hospital a major portion of last year, in the hospital from mid-January till late May, and returning as this semester unfolds. On a personal level, I'd like to introduce Dwight as a friend and a colleague whose perspective, his wisdom, his collegiality, and his stature in this community are valued very, very deeply. First-year students, you may not know Dr. Peterson yet, but I would strongly encourage you, do not graduate until you've had a class with Dr. Peterson. If that's not possible, seek him out for at least one or two conversations in Jam and Java. You will appreciate him and that conversation very deeply as well. Dwight, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Are we cool, Paul? There we are. Let me begin by thanking whoever it was that's responsible for the version of Be Thou My Vision we sang today. The older I get, the more curmudgeonly I get about changing lyrics. You know it's going to be a good day when you start it by singing, "Not be all else to me save that thou art." So whoever did it, God bless you. It's a good way to start the day. I also want to begin by begging your indulgence. I've been in various stages of illness for about a year and a half now, and my own weakness often puts tears closer to the surface than they usually have been for me. I have always been the crier in my family. I cry more than my wife and a lot more than my son. But I've been sort of crying more than usual, so if I sort of start to, get verklempt, just bear with me. I think I'll be able to work through it. I hope. I suspect I've been asked to speak today because I'm just now returning from this long absence. Over many months before last January, I developed a pressure ulcer on the rear hind quarters of my person. And it slowly devolved over a number of months until the point where my physician, a surgeon, finally convinced me that it was time to fix the thing with surgery that would require a very long hospital stay. Surgery was performed on January 19th. I got released from the hospital to go home on May 20th, and not that I'm counting, that's 4 months and 1 day in the hospital. About 2.5 of it never leaving the bed. It was a long time. To tell you the truth, the last year and a half has been a difficult passage for me and my family. We honestly wondered if I'd even survive. Turns out I did. But coming close, when you're about 50, it makes you think, has an impact. You might imagine, therefore, that this experience has been at the forefront of my thinking and that of my family for quite a while. And I want to talk to you out of that experience today for the next little while. I'd like to talk to you about weakness today. In particular, it's a topic that I've become increasingly familiar with over the last 30 years that I've been in a chair, and especially over the last year and a half. I think weakness is a Christian virtue, something to which we should all aspire. And I suspect that if your ears are anything like mine, this sounds a bit odd. After all, in the world we live in, strength is the greatest virtue, the thing to which we're all taught to aspire. We generally try to present ourselves in the best possible light, don't we? Which is to say, we try really hard to show ourselves as strong, independent, in control of our own lives and the lives of others. Don't let them see you sweat, we're told. Even paper towels are supposed to be strong. You know those comparison commercials where the one towel, the good one, stays together and the other one falls apart. And isn't there a brand of paper towel that has a heavily muscled guy in a is it brawny? Yeah. In a world where even paper towels have to be strong, it's hard to laud weakness. And don't get me started on politicians talking about how strong they are. We all know that strength is good and weakness is not. And I don't want you to hear me underestimating or sugarcoating or romanticizing weakness or imagining that weakness doesn't hurt. Sometimes, all the time. There are all kinds of things that are symptoms of our weakness, are there not? Illness, failure, poverty, the death of someone important, loneliness, violence, that kind of personal entropy where you can feel like parts of you are just coming off. And let's be honest, there are problems with weakness. Weakness can be uncomfortable. Weakness can be dangerous. Vulnerability can threaten you. You can die when you're weak. And weakness can be, again, let's be honest, humiliating. I honestly don't remember the number of times when people would come into my room, often people I'd never met before, and they would say, Mr. Peterson, is it? When was your last bowel movement? I don't want to talk about my bowel movements to strangers. Do you? And then, the surgery where I had it, when people cut you open and the thing is supposed to be healing, they want to look at it, and they bring people in to look at it. So they're, they rolled me up on my left side, and sometimes I swear there were 8 or 10 people in the room looking and discussing. If you can't laugh, but it really can be humiliating, can it? You've been weak too. No one, certainly no one in his right mind, would choose weakness over strength. And yet, what if that's a problem? What if it's a problem that we won't or don't want to choose weakness? So, I've been thinking. Now I know that Eastern is not the church. We are, however, a group of mostly Christians who want to encourage one another to aspire to thoughtful and just faithfulness. Are we not? So what if, as a community, we were to commit ourselves to choosing weakness over strength this year? Instead of pretending to be strong, instead of covering our zones of weakness, instead of aspiring to control, what if we embraced, it's a weird word, isn't it, our weakness, chose to be vulnerable, admitted and owned each other's and our own limitations? Now I know what you're thinking. Who is this guy to set the agenda for us this year? So you think he's Joe Modica? Well, fair enough. And if setting an agenda sets your teeth on edge, it does mine. Just think of it like this. There's a guy making a suggestion. Can we do that? Let me be a guy that's making a suggestion. What would it look like if we were to choose weakness? Well, I'm a Bible guy, so I have to say the following, and it's really not a Sunday school-y thing, although it might sound like it. If we were to choose weakness, if we were to be open to vulnerability, it might turn out we might be a little bit more like Jesus. Now, Christians, of course, have never been happy with this. We've never been pleased with a weak Jesus throughout history, and certainly not today. We're much more happy with a strong Jesus. Have you seen those pictures? I mean, honest to God, you see these things of a muscly Jesus like the brawny guy with a spray-on tan, guns slung over his I mean, people do this. I just don't get it. My brother once saw a t-shirt for sale at a conference for evangelical men. The shirt had a picture of a hand on it with a lot of blood on it and a nail through the middle, and it said, "No pain, no gain." Or that spoof trailer of a movie about the second coming featuring weapons fire and red flash flowers blooming a nightmare in the sky. And a voiceover says, "Jesus is coming again, and this time he means business." Or maybe we can pull back a little bit to, sort of with less danger of going over the edge and have something a little bit closer to home. I was reading a book by a theologian named Miroslav Volf the other day, and he has this line in it: "Sometimes, by some strange alchemy, take up your cross and follow me," morphs into, "I'll bring out the champion in you." There's something that doesn't work there. If you think Christianity is largely about winning or influence or dominion or wealth or political power or empire, you're not following the gospel. That's not what it's about. Because the God we see in Jesus Christ lived out his life in weakness. He was probably pretty poor by our standards. He wasn't really well connected. Any powerful people he ever met didn't like him, right? They ended up deciding that he was better off dead. And they succeeded. That ultimate weakness of Jesus, the cross. That cross that we're supposed to take up and follow him, it wasn't a metaphor for him. He was publicly and humiliatingly executed on a cross. He humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross. You recognize the words from Philippians? So if we were to choose weakness, we might end up being a little more like Jesus. If we were to choose weakness, if we were to embrace vulnerability, we might be able to receive more gracefully. That's the second point. If we were to choose weakness, embrace vulnerability, we might be able to receive more gracefully. When you're weak, it can feel as if you have no choices, as if all doors are closed, all windows are shut, all avenues of escape have been blocked. You have no choice in anything. Things just happen to you. This, by the way, is a lie, right? You might not have unlimited choices, but you do have some. You do have some choices when you're weak. During my stay in the hospital, actually just before it, I was imagining, gosh, 3-4 months. The doctor told me 3 months. It turned out he was lying to me. It was 4. After I'd been in the hospital for a couple of weeks, I said, "Could it be more than 3 months?" He goes, "Oh yeah, sure." All right, well, there you go. That's the kind of doctor I had. He's a nice guy, but during my stay and just before it, I had one job given to me by my physicians: lie in the bed and heal. So I was sick and in bed and largely alone for several months. It was pretty bleak time for me. My choices were limited, but not non-existent. And I decided, and I'm really not lying here, you know, sometimes you do things that you're really proud of yourself for doing. This is one of those for me. I decided to try to receive the care given to me by professionals and by friends gracefully. I decided to be thankful for every person who came into my hospital room, to try to be kind to everyone who came in to work on me or to visit me. Now, deciding to do something and actually doing it, they're different things. I failed often, right? I'm no saint. But I often succeeded. And honest to God, I hoped that by exercising kindness, I could be a Christian in very difficult circumstances. Let me give you a single example of receiving gracefully. Being washed when you're in bed. It can be really humiliating. I see nods from the nurses. You know, you're there, you're in bed, you need to get washed. They come and they take the stuff off you, and you're there, and but there's something profoundly moving about being washed as a patient in your bed. You're ill, you're recovering, you need to be cleaned, and people, in my experience, mostly women, came into your room to care for you, carefully, lovingly, sometimes joyously, and you really needed it. There were two women in particular, a couple of Haitian immigrants, Margaret and Rose, but they became friends as much as nursing staff can become your friends in the hospital. And some days, the two of them would wait to the end of their shift. They would take care of all their other things, and then they would wait to the end of their shift and come into my room at the end, and they would wash me together. Some days, I mean, we would talk and we would joke and we would laugh, and there was almost something, can I say this? There's almost something holy about it. But you need to be able to receive, almost to revel, can I say it that way, in your weakness? To allow others to give you the help you so desperately need. Receiving gracefully turns out to be a choice, and it also requires practice. But my goodness, it can bring light to your darkness. Third, if we were to choose weakness, we might be able to give more faithfully. Now, giving, you know, is often a sign of strength. We give to demonstrate how strong we are, how much money we have, how much influence we can wield. We give with strings attached in order to put people and institutions in our debt. We give so we can control how the money is spent. Giving is a mark of accomplishment. That's not the kind of giving I'm talking about. I'm talking about giving out of weakness, giving in a context of mutual vulnerability. I've tried to think of an example of this that won't be hackneyed or trite. And I thought about people who visited me while I was in the hospital. Can I just say, Joe Modica is a champion visitor. Joe brought, the first two times he came, he brought me crosses. This is one of them. The other one is on a little shelf next to my bed. This one's going on a shelf in my office today. One of the things that Joe did for me is orchestrate a photograph of the faculty that hung on my wall. Thank you for that. It was moving the day I received that, Joe. Thank you. But one of my favorite visits happened on February 25th. I know this because I had a book next to my bed that I had people sign. I made them sign it when they came. And I'd been in the hospital for about a month, and 5 students came to visit me. Now, many more students came, but these 5 was particularly fun. I'm going to tell you what their names were, and some of them are here, I know. One of these students is named Josh Brayman. Josh, are you here? Where are you at? There you are. Josh goes to the church that my parents go to on Cape Cod. And my parents, by the way, are here. And he brought 4 friends from his small group: Julia Kinbacher, Dave Speak, Emily Samuelson, and Jason Thompson. I don't know if any of you were here today. Now, I might be interpreting what was going on wrongly. I think I'm right, though. Doesn't matter if I'm wrong. I'm the one talking. I get to say what I want to say, right? It looked to me like these 5 people, with respect to me, were in a position of weakness. You don't like to visit. Do you like to visit people in the hospital? Some of us do, but it's uncomfortable to visit people in the hospital, and God forbid it's a professor. You know, I mean, when I was in college, I didn't like to go to the professor's office. It was just too scary. These people came and visited me in the hospital. They came and visited me in the hospital because they knew that one of the things you do is you visit the sick. And so they visited me, and I'll never forget just this image that I have of the 5 of them standing at the base of my bed. And we had this conversation. They were all sort of, you know, uncomfortable looking down at the ground, and we engaged in conversation. And part of me almost wanted to giggle at how afraid they seemed, but most of me was deeply moved by the fact that they, 3 of whom I had never met before, came to visit the sick. Thank you. You don't have to be strong to do this for people. In fact, it works better when you're weak. 2 final remarks, and I'll get out of your hair. 1, weakness and vulnerability work best when they're done in community, when they're mutual. They work best when you can know that I'm not lying in wait to take advantage of you when you let your guard down. And when I know that you're not planning to pounce when I lose my strength. That's, I think, what I meant when I said earlier that I wondered what it might look like if we as a community were to try to live in mutual vulnerability together this year. And second, relates to a passage of Scripture that I was supposed to read before I started talking today. It's the last couple of verses of the Gospel of John. Let me read them for you, out of order, but I'll do it anyway. Just 2 little verses. Some of you know them already. This is the disciple who bears witness about these things, the one who has written these things down. We know that his witness is true. There are many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written down in one place, I suppose the whole world couldn't contain the books that would be written. That passage that talks about how you can't count everything that Jesus did, one of the things I like about it is the implicit window it leaves open to more things happening in the story of Jesus. And in fact, that story goes on. It has gone on for the 1900 and however many years since the death of Jesus and resurrection. There have been faithful people trying to carry on the presence of Jesus in the world ever since the ascension of our Lord. We get to be part of that story. I'd love it if we as a community of people who aspire to be faithful to Jesus could practice being a bit more like him this year. And while this isn't all that looking like Jesus entails, way more complex and interesting than this, it at least involves receiving gracefully and giving faithfully. I wonder what it would look like for us to do that this year. Thank you.